Hello, everyone. Picture this. A woman steps into the lens, emerald eyes, sculpted cheekbones, a stare that does not invite you in, but dares you to come closer. She is not walking, she is gliding. She is not smiling, she is seducing without sound. At the height of the supermodel era, Helena Christensen did not chase attention. She absorbed it. She was called one of the most beautiful women in the world. And yet, she never seemed to belong to it. She moved through fashion like someone just passing through, untouchable, unknowable. But behind the campaigns, the magazine covers, and the iconic music video that sealed her myth, there was something else. A woman searching for escape. A model who never wanted to be just a model. So who was Helena Christensen really? And what was she running from, even at her most adored? Helena Christensen was born in Copenhagen in 1968, but her roots stretched far beyond the cool gray skies of Denmark. Her mother was Peruvian, her father Danish, and from that unlikely fusion came a face that felt both ancient and futuristic. Even as a child, Helena did not look like the others. Her skin held a softness that did not belong to Northern Europe. Her eyes, deep green and almond-shaped, carried the intensity of someone always watching, always questioning. People stared. She got used to it. But admiration, even early on, felt like a strange kind of distance. She grew up in a modest apartment in the city, surrounded by books, photographs, and the scent of her mother's cooking. Her parents encouraged creativity, but there was no golden path waiting for her. The world did not yet have a name for her kind of beauty. She was not the blonde Nordic girl next door. She was darker, sharper, more difficult to place. Teachers called her distracted. Classmates called her exotic. Helena learned early that being different meant being watched, and being watched meant building walls. As a teenager, she found escape in imagery. She was fascinated by cameras not as tools of vanity, but as windows into other lives. She would later say that before she ever dreamed of being photographed, she wanted to be the one behind the lens. But fate had other plans. At age 17, Helena entered and won the Miss Universe Denmark pageant. She did not expect to win. She barely smiled on stage, but something about her presence quiet, magnetic, could not be ignored. Suddenly, the girl who had once felt out of place was being flown to Paris, to Milan, to New York. She left Copenhagen with a suitcase and a silence that followed her everywhere. The modeling world was seductive, surreal, and brutal. But Helena had already mastered the art of holding herself apart. That would become her shield, and later, her signature. In interviews, she rarely spoke much about her childhood. Not because it was painful, but because it felt far away, like another lifetime. Yet its fingerprints were everywhere, in her posture, in her gaze, in her resistance to being defined. Helena Christensen was not raised to seek attention. She was raised to observe, to endure, to remember, and that, more than anything, is what she carried into the world of fashion, the quiet knowledge that beauty is not what you give away, it is what you protect. Helena Christensen's entry into fashion was not marked by desperation or wild ambition. She did not chase it, it found her. And even then, she held it at arm's length. After winning Miss Universe Denmark in 1986, Helena was suddenly thrust into the pageant circuit, a world of forced smiles, stiff poses, and rules she had no interest in obeying. She performed as expected, but behind her striking eyes was a quiet defiance. She knew she did not belong in that glossy, predictable narrative. But the title opened a door, and Helena, out of curiosity more than hunger, stepped through it. Paris came first. The agencies were intrigued but uncertain. Her face was too unusual for the catalogs, too sensual for the beauty ads, too unreadable for the commercial market. But that unreadability, That refusal to offer easy emotion became her strength. Helena was not trying to look like anything. She simply existed in front of the camera, letting others project their fantasies onto her. She once said that modeling felt like watching herself from the outside. That detachment became a kind of magic. She could wear the clothes, sell the image, live the illusion, and still remain untouched. Then came New York, and with it, everything changed. In the early 1990s, the fashion world was shifting. The age of the supermodel was dawning, and with it came a hunger for personalities that were more than just beautiful. Helena Christensen arrived in the city with no intention of joining that race, and perhaps that was why she stood out. She signed with DNA models and almost immediately began booking jobs that pushed her further into the spotlight. Photographers adored her. Designers found her enigmatic. She was not loud. She did not play the room. She walked in, gave them one look, and the room bent around her. The campaign that truly transformed her career was for Revlon. The face that had once been too unconventional now appeared on billboards, in department stores, and in every beauty magazine worth printing. But it was not until she starred in the music video for Chris Isaak's Wicked Game that Helena Christensen crossed into myth. Shot in black and white, the video was sensual, dreamlike, and strangely sad. On a deserted beach, Helena moved like a woman in a trance, half siren, half ghost. She was not performing. She was remembering. The video became a cultural phenomenon. And overnight, she was no longer just a model. She was an icon of desire, frozen forever in the collective imagination. But what no one knew at the time was how much Helena struggled with the attention. The constant gaze, the endless expectations, the demand to always look perfect, effortless, seductive. She was never addicted to fame. In fact, she recoiled from it. She often left fashion weeks early, skipped parties, refused interviews. She wanted the work, not the circus. By the time she was in her mid-20s, Helena had walked for every major house: Chanel, Versace, Valentino, and had been photographed by the best her Brits, Peter Lindbergh, Mario Testino. But even then, she never fully surrendered to the fashion machine. She would disappear for months, only to return with more gravity, more mystery. The industry never quite knew what to do with that, and Helena liked it that way. Her rise was not a meteoric explosion. It was a slow eclipse, beautiful, inevitable, and impossible to look away from. There was a moment in the 1990s when Helena Christensen was everywhere, and yet nowhere. She dominated covers, campaigns, and catwalks, but always with the air of someone who might disappear at any second. That was her power. She gave everything to the lens and nothing to the noise. While others courted celebrity, Helena kept her distance, walking through fashion like a mirage impossible to hold, unforgettable to see. Her golden era began not with a single moment, but with an accumulation of them. The Wicked Game video had turned her into a cultural symbol, not just of beauty, but of longing, and fashion, always thirsty for myth, wrapped itself around her. She became one of the original Victoria's Secret angels, bringing elegance to a brand still finding its identity. She graced the cover of Vogue multiple times, often without smiling, daring the viewer to find warmth in her stillness. Designers adored her. Gianni Versace called her a force. Karl Lagerfeld was captivated by the way she moved like smoke through velvet. Helena could transform a room by doing nothing at all. She was not known for outrageous behavior, dramatic walkouts, or loud declarations. She simply showed up, did the work, and left behind images that stayed burned in memory. There was a strange softness to her peak. While other supermodels became brand empires, Helena remained elusive. She modeled for Prada and Hermes in the same month she walked barefoot for up-and-coming designers. She never demanded front-row attention. She was never caught in the politics of who wore what better. She had nothing to prove. The proof was in the photograph's timeless, haunting, and utterly hers. At a time when fashion flirted with excess, Helena kept it stripped down. Her beauty was not loud. It did not scream. It hovered. She could wear a simple slip dress and make it feel like poetry. And in an industry desperate for reinvention, Helena made consistency feel radical. She did not change to chase trends. She remained steady, magnetic, unknowable. What defined her golden era was not just her visibility, but her refusal to overexpose. She preserved the mystery. She allowed fashion to borrow her image, but never herself. That is why the Helena of that time does not feel dated. She is not locked to the 90s. She floats above it, untouched by time, unbothered by legacy. Helena Christensen was never the loudest supermodel, but in the silence she left behind, she became one of the most unforgettable. Helena Christensen never declared herself a rebel. She never shouted about change. But her entire career was an act of quiet defiance against the formulas, the branding, the expectation that a woman so beautiful should also be easy to define. In a decade obsessed with labels, Helena refused one. She was neither the sexy bombshell nor the icy muse. She was both, and neither, and more. While most supermodels were expanding into business ventures and creating media empires, Helena was vanishing into dark rooms, learning how to photograph instead of being photographed. She became the anomaly, a woman whose beauty was her currency, but who kept stepping away from it as if trying to prove a point. She did not want to be just an image. She wanted to create them. She also did something nearly unheard of at the peak of her fame. She aged naturally, publicly, gracefully. She did not chase the illusion of eternal youth. She allowed the lines to come, allowed the softness to shift, allowed herself to evolve in full view, in an industry that punished women for aging. Helena treated it as freedom. She once said she felt more beautiful at 40 than she ever had at 20. Not because the world told her so, but because she had stopped asking it to. Helena also refused to let her identity be consumed by fashion. Her mixed heritage was not a brand. Her femininity was not a performance. She spoke softly in interviews, often redirecting the conversation away from glamour and toward the things she loved: photography, travel, human rights, the ocean. When the press asked for spectacle, she gave them sincerity. And the more she resisted the supermodel myth, the more powerful she became within it. There were costs to her refusal. She was never the most quoted, never the most chased by tabloids. She lost jobs because she did not play by the industry's script. But what she gained was rarer control. Helena set her own pace, her own path, her own rules. She modeled on her own terms, and when those terms no longer served her, she stepped back without apology. Perhaps what made Helena different was not that she challenged fashion standards, but that she refused to be shaped by them in the first place. She entered the industry intact, and left it intact no small feat for any woman, let alone one whose face once defined desire itself. Helena Christensen was not the face of rebellion. She was its silhouette, elegant, quiet, and always just out of reach. Helena Christensen did not fall in the way tabloids like to chronicle. There was no breakdown caught on camera, no scandal flooding headlines, no public unraveling. Her withdrawal from fashion was quieter than that, a slow retreat rather than a sudden collapse. But make no mistake, there was a cost, and Helena paid it in silence. The pressures of being a supermodel in the 1990s were brutal, even for someone as seemingly untouchable as her. The constant travel, the expectation to remain effortlessly beautiful, the emotional dislocation of living out of suitcases and hotel lobbies, it all compounded into a kind of spiritual fatigue. Helena once said that modeling taught her how to detach from her own image. It was not a metaphor. It was a coping mechanism. Behind the grace and elegance was a woman who often felt like she was disappearing inside the very thing that made her famous. The photo shoots were beautiful. The runways were grand. But the girl in them, the real Helena, often felt like a ghost trapped in other people's fantasies. And when the applause faded, the loneliness remained. She never called it depression. She never named the weight that lingered in her chest. But those close to her noticed the long silences, the quiet retreats, the need to get away from the noise. In her early 30s, she made a decision that startled many. She stepped back, no dramatic press release, no farewell tour, just distance. She turned toward photography, not just as a hobby but as a lifeline. Behind the camera, she felt invisible in the best way. There were no mirrors, no corrections, no edits to her body or face, just light, shadow, and perspective. In capturing others, she began to reclaim herself. She also became a mother. In 1999, she gave birth to her son with actor Norman Reedus. Motherhood shifted something fundamental in her. The industry's urgency faded. The deadlines meant less. The image was no longer the priority. She started choosing peace over exposure, depth over reach, time over money. Some called it a disappearance. But for Helena, it was the first time she had truly arrived in her own life. Even as she aged, Helena refused to erase time from her face. She posed for campaigns with her wrinkles intact, her gray streaks visible, not as a stunt, but as a statement. She did not want to be seen as still beautiful for her age. She wanted to be seen simply as a woman who had lived. Her retreat was not a fall, it was a return to self, to silence, to truth. And in a world built on illusion, that may have been her boldest act of all. Helena Christensen never chased immortality, and yet she achieved it. Not through empire building or reinvention, but through presence deep, unwavering, and impossible to replicate. Her legacy is not one of noise or numbers. It is the quiet breath she left in every image, the feeling you cannot name when you look at her face, the memory that lingers after the lights go out. She redefined what it meant to be a supermodel not by becoming larger than life, but by never giving all of herself to the spectacle. She gave the camera what it needed, but kept her soul intact. That refusal to be consumed became her power. She did not play the game. She reshaped it in silence. Today, Helena still models, still creates, still walks the streets of Copenhagen with the same quiet mystery she carried through Paris and New York. She is a mother, a photographer, an environmentalist. But above all, she is proof that a woman can move through beauty without being trapped by it. Maybe that is the true legacy, not the covers or the campaigns, but the freedom she carved out by saying no, by stepping back, by choosing to be whole instead of endlessly seen. Helena Christensen was never built to be a brand. She was built to be a moment, and that moment, decades later, is still echoing.